So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me today for this very important taster session on suicide awareness and prevention, breaking silence and building support. My name, as the slide suggests, is Adam. I'm the Senior Mental Health Trainer for PAM Wellness. I started working for PAM around 8 years ago as a counsellor and step care therapist before I moved into the training team approximately 3 years ago. And my role now involves the design, development and facilitation of a number of broadcasts, webinars and different types of sessions on the many topics of mental health and mental health awareness. And I'm delighted to be invited here today to present this 30-minute wellbeing taster session for World Suicide Prevention Day 2024, and to hopefully build up on any knowledge you may already have on today's topic. Now, before we start today's session, and as I alluded to, I just want to remind you of our webinar taster sessions, of which this is. These are free high-level taster sessions to give you a flavour of the training and workshops and that we offer at PAM Wellness, and hopefully they'll provide you all with a few hints and tips that you can take away. Again, if you have any questions during today's session, please do use either the Q&A chat function or just the normal chat function throughout the webinar. And at the end of the session, I'll do my very best to answer any questions about how we can support your workplace. And then you can get in contact with us on the email address that you see on your screen right now at the bottom. And also that will be available at the end as well. And as I mentioned before, again, this session is recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel after today's session. So if you want to have a look at the session later on, again, you're more than welcome to. We don't provide copies of the slides, but as I say, it is available on the PAM Wellness YouTube channel. So we're going to start today's session by looking at suicide. We're going to look at some of the stigma and myths around suicide before we look at how we can support those who might have suicidal ideation. Now, we're all likely to be aware of what suicide is. The dictionary definition states that suicide is the act or an instant of taking one's own life, voluntary and intentionally. Now, there is a word that quite often prefixes the word suicide that from today it would be really helpful if we stop using that word in the context of suicide. So can anybody maybe tell me what they think that word might be? If you want to put it in the chat there, there's a word that often is used in everyday use of the word. A couple of people are using the chat already. Yeah. And lots of people are putting there committed. Yeah, okay. The reason why we'd ask you to stop using that word commit, if you have been using it, and encourage others to do the same, is that it suggests that maybe a crime has been committed. Up until 1961, the previous crime of self-murder was still applicable. And under the Suicide Act 1961, it was abolished. And I guess that gives us some understanding of how misunderstandings about mental health and suicide embroiled our society many years ago, and still how there is much more work that we can do today to help with that. So again, by not using that word commit, again, hopefully that will encourage people to think about how people actually need support and help when they need it. So let's have a look at some of the prevalence of suicide here in the UK. Data on suicide in the UK is reported by the Office for National Statistics in England and Wales. And in England and Wales in 2022, there were 5,642 registered suicides. This was equivalent to 10.7 deaths per 100,000 people. And this is consistent with 2021, where there was 5,583 deaths, but again at that rate of 10.7 per 100,000. Males continue to account for 3/4 of suicide deaths registered in 2022, so of the 5,642 registered suicides, 4,172 were male deaths compared to 1,463 female deaths, a trend seen since the mid-1990s. In 2022, the suicide rates for males, 16.4 deaths per 100,000, and females, 5.4 per 100,000, were consistent with rates between 2018 and 2021. For Scotland, data is monitored by the National Record of Scotland. There were 762 probable suicides in 2022, an increase of 9 from 2021. And female suicides increased by 18 to 2006, while male suicides decreased by 9 to 556 deaths in the latest year. The rate of suicide in males was again almost 3 times as high as the rate for females. So why do we think, looking at some of those statistics there, that some of the deaths amongst males for suicide are higher and significantly higher than those of females? What might be some of the reasons, do we think? Again, put it in the chat there, your thoughts. I'll read some of these out. So, less encouraged to talk about their feelings. Well, lots of taster webinars that we've looked about men's mental health does suggest that men are less likely due to societal norms to talk. Hopefully that stigma again is being broken down by the work we're doing as mental health professionals and health professionals. It could be down to things like loneliness, stigma again, feelings of failure, pride. Women are more inclined to share their problems, and this has shown that when we look at our EAP statistics, that around 2/3 of the calls we receive are female, and the other third are males. Men haven't been encouraged to discuss emotions in their past, stigma, stress, money worries, etc. And I think one that really sums it up here is attitudes to male and female mental health differ. Men are not supposed to have mental health issues or acknowledge them. So again, we need to highlight the importance for all people to be allowed to talk about how they're feeling, and also when it comes to crisis, how they can talk about feeling suicidal. And what we're going to look at now is what is suicidal ideation. This is a short video which shows how not talking about suicide isn't helpful, and actually we need to be talking more about it, particularly when someone is indicative of suicidal ideation. So there might be some signs that they're suicidal, how important it is that we speak to them about that.
Eight minutes of buffering. Annoying.
I'll just try and skip this ad.
Until another older person like Jean dies in poverty.
Apologies, but it's just going through a bit of a...
Unacceptable. Take just 1 minute to find out what you can do.
An ad here before we start. Oh, here's another one. Sorry about this, folks. It won't let me skip, it's just letting me pause the video. I hope it'll go over it.
Everyone would be better off without me.
I couldn't see any other way out.
I wish I could go to sleep and never wake up.
I wanted all of this to go away.
These are the voices of suicidal ideation, which is the thinking that haunts people and brings them to the brink of taking their own lives. Most of us have been touched by suicide in some way. Some of us have personally lost a loved one to suicide, or we know someone who has. Some of us have had suicidal thoughts ourselves or even attempted suicide. Far too many people take their own lives every year in America, with especially concerning rates in veterans and adolescents. We know there are certain situations that add to the risk of people attempting suicide. If they have made an attempt in the past, if a member of their family has attempted or died from suicide, If they own or have easy access to weapons, a lot of unused medication or drugs, or anything else that could be used to attempt suicide. If any of these are true, their risk can increase further if they struggle with mental health problems. Depressed mood and hopelessness are serious risk factors. Other problems like a recent breakup, job loss, or legal trouble can be important to consider. Or if they use drugs or drink alcohol. Both are highly related to death by suicide. And if someone uses much more during difficult times, it's important to notice this. We are completely certain of two things. Suicidal ideation is an emergency, and we can all play an important part of saving someone who might be living it. Here are a few critical things to understand. Most of the time, people don't want to die. Even when things feel very bad, most people truly want to live. People say they just don't want to feel the pain anymore. That's why it's so important for you to know what to look for. So how can you tell if someone in your life needs help, and what should you do? First, really listen. This is often the most important thing to do when someone we know is struggling. If a person is thinking of suicide, he or she says so. Sometimes the person literally comes out and says something like, "I wish I were dead." Other people may mention suicidal thoughts more passively, saying something like, "If I were gone, no one would notice," or "I have nothing to live for," or "I just wish all of this would stop." Then, watch. Heavy or increased drug or alcohol use can be a warning sign if someone has been thinking of suicide. Also, pay attention if someone is socially isolated, or if someone tells you he or she is feeling overwhelmed by stressful situations that don't seem to have solutions. We need to notice when our friends and family are having more trouble than they usually do. Finally, ask. If anything does not feel or sound right to you, or if you're worried at all, ask about it. Make it straightforward and don't be afraid. Use these words. Are you thinking of killing yourself? You will not give someone the idea if that person wasn't already considering it. In fact, most of the time, people feel relieved that they can talk about what they're struggling with, and you very well might save their lives. If you think someone is in danger of suicide, stay with them and get help. If your friend or loved one admits to thinking about suicide, make sure the situation is safe and stay with the person. Validate his or her feelings and listen without judgment, even if it's scary. Encourage the person to get professional help right away, and help if necessary, even if this means calling 911 or going to the hospital. Every one of us has a role to play in preventing suicide. If you are feeling like suicide might be an option for you, please be brave and ask for help. If you're worried about someone you care about, be the one who asks the all-important question. You could very well save that person's life.
So the video there talks about some of the risk factors that could indicate that somebody is at risk of taking their own life. What do you think could be a risk factor? I know one or two people have mentioned some things like this in the chat already. What sort of factors in life that somebody is exposed to that could lead to suicidal ideation, do we think? We've got things like debt, money, relationship breakdown, divorce, abuse, grief, feeling overwhelmed, illness, depression, stress, trauma. Quite a few things there. Yeah. And all of these could eventually lead to someone feeling helpless, hopeless, and also suicidal. Now, there are many risk factors to suicide, and it's important to note that because these circumstances have occurred, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will lead to suicide. However, it could indicate a statistical probability that it could occur. So if someone you know discloses any risk factor on the slide, whether it be they've been exposed to violence, drug and alcohol misuse, having a history of trauma or abuse, a diagnosed mental health condition like depression, feelings of hopelessness about their situation, so for example, being in debt, that they've been imprisoned, face an imprisonment, or are in prison, have a family breakdown, been bereaved by suicide, or are isolated, then that could be an increased risk. It's important to consider what we can do to support somebody in these situations. So again, if you know that somebody is exposed to these risk factors and they've declared that they intend to harm themselves, that there is an increased risk. So again, be aware of these risk factors here. Now, we're going to move on to debunk some common myths about suicide and suicidal ideation. And the first myth we're going to debunk is that people who talk about suicide aren't serious and won't go through with it. People who've taken their own lives have often told someone that they do not feel life is worth living or that they've had no future. Some may have actually said that they want to die. It's possible that someone might talk about suicide as a way of getting attention in the sense of calling out for help. So it's always important to always take someone seriously if they talk about feeling suicidal, help them get the support that they vitally need could save their life. The second myth we're going to debunk today is that you must be mentally ill to think about suicide. In fact, 1 in 5 people have thought about suicide at some time in their life, and not all people who die by suicide have mental health problems at the time of their death. However, many who do kill themselves do suffer with their mental health, typically to a serious degree. Sometimes it's known about before the person's death, and sometimes not. And the third myth we're going to debunk is talking about suicide is a bad idea, as it may give someone the idea to try it. This is often something I hear when delivering sessions of training to people who are supporting somebody who's distressed and or suicidal, that they're very concerned and nervous, feeling that, well, if I ask this person, have they had suicidal ideation? Are they talking about killing themselves? That I might put a seed in their head about that. Well, as the video indicated, if that person's already had that thought, then that thought's already there. And quite often, people who've taken their own lives have often told someone that they have or do not feel life is worth living. Some may have actually said that they want to die. And people who have felt suicidal will often say what a huge relief it was to be able to talk about what they were experiencing. And once someone starts talking, they've got a better chance of discovering options other than suicide. And evidence from research by a professor of health psychology at Glasgow University, Rory O'Connor, states that evidence shows asking someone if they are suicidal can actually protect them. They feel listened to and hopefully less trapped. Their feelings are validated and they know that somebody cares about them. And this is a really crucial part. Reaching out can save a life. We're now going to have a look on this slide, some guidance as what you can do in a situation where someone may disclose being at risk to themselves. For example, a person may disclose to you that they intend to harm or kill themselves. And again, this can be highly distressing for everyone concerned. Now, we understand that many of you are not counsellors, but it's important that you're aware of what you can do in these situations to help somebody. So here are a few things to consider. Firstly, take the disclosure seriously. Remain calm and really listen carefully to what that person is saying. Now, as we've alluded to, it can be better to address the person's feelings directly rather than skirt around them. Again, you might feel uncomfortable and unsure of what to say. This is entirely normal and completely understandable. But if you can be calm, supportive, and non-judgmental, you can help that person. And seek support if needed from maybe colleagues, your line manager, next of kin, for example. ascertain level of risk by gathering relevant information. So, for example, if you're on the telephone to somebody, what is happening for the individual? Who are they with? Where are they? So try and establish a location if needed. Many people obviously will use mobile phones, so they might not be at their home address. And what you're trying to do here is trying to ascertain, are they at immediate risk? For example, are they saying that they have the intent, they have a plan and the means to harm themselves? Now, asking these kind of questions may come easier to some than others. Some people may prefer asking directly, others more conversational, or maybe a blend of both. Do what works best for you. And if it is immediate urgent risk, so the person has said, yes, they are talking about killing themselves, yes, they have the intent to do that and they have the means and the plan to do that, then you may need to refer to emergency help. Call 999 with as much information about what is happening to that person. So, for example, if they've told you that they've taken an overdose, what is it they've taken, how much, when, etc. And then the operative will guide you to what service is needed. Now, if again you're calling on the telephone about somebody in a different area to you, be aware that if you're calling about someone in a different region, you may be transferred or asked to call their local emergency services centre. So don't panic if that's the case, that is quite normal. And it may be helpful to have someone else supporting you, maybe a colleague, your line manager, a friend, etc., and discuss with the other person what you're going to do. Signpost to internal or external services if relevant. So if risk is not immediate, so somebody has spoken about taking their own life and had suicidal thoughts, but they have no intent or no means or no plan, then it can be still important to seek support and disclose relevant information, such as speaking with a trusted manager regarding risk, encouraging the individual to speak to their GP. And many of you may be aware of the new mental health crisis support that's available via 111 option 2 for those in England. Or it could be that they are encouraged to access counselling services, for example, an EAP, if they have access to that service. And finally, review the incident. Discuss it with your line manager if you're at work. Record any necessary notes and data in line with your organisation's policies around data protection. Now, this process is not linear, and some risks may be more apparent and require immediate emergency attention, for example. And this approach is only a guide, and you should always refer to any internal policies and guidance as what to do in your own organisation. But what is also vitally important is to know that providing such support for individuals who disclose risk can also impact on your own emotional state. So do monitor how you are feeling after these incidences too. Do practice self-care, be good to yourself, and seek support in the form of a debrief, maybe with a colleague, your manager, or call to your EAP, for example, like PAM Assist. And if you continue to feel distressed about the incident or have suicidal thoughts yourself, please do speak to your GP, contact your EAP or other support services, which we're going to outline on the next slide. So if you have concerns about a young person who's at risk, there are support services such as Papyrus, which you can call for anybody under the age of 35. They're available Monday to Friday from 10 till 10, weekends and bank holidays 2 till 10. The Samaritans are available for everybody, no matter what their age. That 6-digit number, 116123, is the number to call. There is no 0800 prefix or any area dialing code to call. That is the number. Anxiety UK also have an information line to help, and Mind UK have a really good website about what you can do to support somebody in crisis. And there's also resources on there to help somebody who might also be self-harming and ways to help soothe some of these very strong emotions people may have. So again, if you want to do some further reading, that's a really good website to have a look at as well. Now, as well as today's taster session on suicide and prevention. We also offer at Pan Wellness other sessions to help people with their mental health and their physical health. This could include sessions around stress and burnout and anxiety, depression, trauma, etc., or things like men's and women's health, menopause, support, smoking cessation, etc., etc. We have over 80 more training workshop topics around corporate health, mental health, and well-being. So if you feel that today's session has been helpful for you and you'd like to know more about our offerings, please do either give us a call on the number on the slide there or email businesssupport@panwellbeing.co.uk, and we'll be delighted to discuss your training or screening requirements. Okay, so I've left enough time to answer any questions anybody might have. So if you've got any questions you'd like to ask me, feel free, please, to put them either in the chat or in the QA box. I'm just going to have a quick look through the chat to see if there's any questions in there that might have snuck in when we were asking for some contributions. I can see lots of contributions from everybody who when I asked for them, so thank you very much everybody for those. I can just see something coming in now. Is a recording of the session available? Absolutely. That'll be available on our Pan Wellness YouTube station. So when we come to the end of this session, that will get processed. It's beyond my capabilities, that, but I'll sure to make sure that in the chat later on as well, if that's still available, we'll put a link in there as well. Or if you don't know where it is, again, the email address in there, just put it in there, businesssupport@panwellbeing.co.uk, asking for the recording of the session, and I'm sure somebody will get back to you with a link to where that Pan Wellness video will be. So I hope that's helpful. Lois, can we download the slides, please? Again, we have the recording. We don't offer the slides for these free taster sessions, unfortunately. If we're not supposed to use the word commit, what word do we use? I guess asking ourselves, just maybe, for example, it's difficult. It depends in which context you're using it. So, for example, when we looked at those statistics earlier, we talked about registered suicides, people that have died by suicide. Maybe something like that could be helpful. So I hope that was helpful as well, Imogen. Again, it's difficult to sort of say in what context. So again, hopefully that was helpful. Please, could you issue a link? I'm guessing that's for the recording. Again, if you put in the business at support@panwellbeing.co.uk email address, we can provide the link for you there. What would be advice for following up with somebody who admitted having suicide feelings in the past, but saying that they are much better now? Maybe just ask them how are they doing? How are things? How are they feeling? Remember this backronym, fine, though. Often people retort when you ask them how they're feeling with that word fine. That could often be feeling insecure, need encouragement. So maybe it's just asking them, okay, what's fine, what's not fine? But let them bring that topic up if they want to. But ask them, how they are, how they're feeling, and checking in with them. So if they are feeling much better now, that's a good indication. People sometimes do, as we said before, 1 in 5 people report having suicidal ideation. It doesn't mean that it will continue throughout their lives, or it might just appear at certain times in their lives. What can you do if someone doesn't want to seek or accept help? That can be really difficult for many people. Again, it depends on what context. So from a work perspective, it might be if you know that somebody has had suicidal thoughts and their intention is to take their own life, that you must tell somebody, their GP, or your work, and have policies around what to do in those circumstances. But encourage them is if they're saying that they've had those thoughts and it's a pattern of maybe symptoms of maybe depression, etc. Encourage them to speak to their GP, giving them signposting support, etc. Because what you often find is people will find that they'll accept support when they're ready to. It might just be that at that moment they're unable to, and they're trying to process things themselves. But knowing that you're there as well will be very helpful for them. If someone might open up suggestions, again, hopefully that was helpful there. Anything else? I think a couple of people got their hands up, but I think that was a legacy from before when I asked, can you all see the slides? That's Mark Summers and Stephen Abraham. So if you want to put a question, Mark or Stephen, in the chat, feel free to do so. I think it was just a legacy from before. Should signposting be used to offer therapy-based, i.e. cognitive behaviour therapy? I guess you could maybe suggest, if you've maybe found it helpful in the past, if that's something that you found helpful, but it may be that you want to say to that person, there are things like, maybe if they're in employment, maybe in EAP, if they have that service access to them, IAPS, if not through the NHS, having a chat with their GP. And obviously, those services will be able to recommend therapy for that person, either cognitive behaviour therapy or counselling. It depends on what that person has divulged there. Different ways to support friends when they react defensively to you, asking about how they feel, whether they're okay. I guess maybe again to just let them know that you're there, and if they are feeling defensive, don't take any offence to that. You've asked the question, and that's how they're saying they're feeling. Maybe ask the question again. Okay, what's fine, what's not fine? If they're shutting it down, okay, I'm here for support if and when you do want to talk about it then. And maybe leave it at that. But don't forget, again, your own support in asking those questions as well. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance. We've come to the end of this taster session. Again, hopefully you found it very useful. Thank you very much, everybody, for your kind comments in the box there. And hopefully I'll see you all again on some future wellbeing sessions. And again, if you've got anything that you'd like to ask us specifically for your own organisation, please do get in contact and we'll be delighted to help and support where we can. So thank you very much, everybody, and take care. Bye-bye.